Welcome to the SDG Media Zone at the UN High-Level Political Forum. In this panel, we're going to be discussing electric vehicles and the role that the Formula E World Championship is playing in popularizing them and raising awareness of the importance of sustainable transport. And it is important. By some estimates, transport's responsible for around a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions, consuming huge quantities of fossil fuels. Combustion engines are also a major cause of poor air quality in urban areas, a factor in asthma and other respiratory diseases. Despite being around for some time, electric vehicles have remained a small part of the overall car market. However, with growing concern about climate change and some eye-catching commitments from governments and car manufacturers, that could be about to change. The UN also has a role to play. The organization will be convening the Sustainable Transport Conference from the 14th to the 16th of October, with a focus on how to plan and develop transport systems that boost economic growth, reduce inequalities, and improve the environment for everyone. Joining me to discuss the rise of EVs from electric dreams to supercharged reality are Julia Pallé, Formula E's Sustainability Director, and Lucas Grassi, driver with the Audi team, who won the championship's first ever race back in 2014 and was the champion of the 2016 to 2017 season. Thanks to you both. And we'll start with you, Julia. Now, I've been following Formula E for several years now, and I've always been struck by the extent to which everyone, from the management team to drivers and everyone in between, can speak knowledgeably about sustainability. Does everyone involved in Formula E need to have a strong understanding, do you think?
It's absolutely essential. Formula E has been built with the sustainability in their DNA, so it's very much part of the reason why the teams, the partners, the drivers join us. Obviously, we're lucky to have Lucas with us today. That is, extremely committed and devoted to the topic. But for the rest of the ecosystem, it's very much the reason why they are racing with us. And that's the reason why also everyone is involved in trying to push electric vehicles to a much more kind of like mass market stage in terms of the mobility field.
And so the discussions, do they come up a lot when you're speaking to team members, other representatives? Are they all interested in the subject and happy to talk about it?
Yeah, as I said, people are joining Formula E because they are using the platform to not only help advance electrification, but also to showcase that sustainability is a key commitment. For example, our main sponsors and partners, their main focus is trying to showcase that they are contributing through their products and services to help us transition to a low carbon economy in line with what the Paris Agreement is trying to achieve.
Well, Lucas, as Julia said, you're a great example, someone who's very knowledgeable about the subject. You're also a clean air advocate for UN Environment, I think since 2018, so quite a while now, and you speak frequently on sustainability issues. I think you were speaking a little earlier last month. Very high level of knowledge. So do you find that you discuss these issues internally a lot with drivers, with members of your team?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Conor, and Julia is very kind. And Julia has helped me a lot to since the beginning of Formula E to understand many topics of sustainability, which is such a complex topic when you put together with economic development and sustainability. When you put both together, it's actually even more complex, and there is no, at some point, there is even high-level discussions of what is right, what is wrong, and how to do stuff. I think the sustainability in general, and especially when Formula E was created, when I joined Formula E in 2012, actually, the first race was 2014, but I was the third employee of the series, was basically Alejandro, which is the founder, Alberto, with the PowerPoint. And then Alejandro called me and said, do you want to join? And I said, join what? And he was like, join, we have built an electric racing series. And so I like electric cars. By then, I was racing Formula One, and I've driven a Tesla Roadster, and I was very interested about how the technology would evolve. The physics made a lot of sense, so why not make a racing series which could be successful if that was the right way forward? So yeah, and then we've been through a long road now, 10 years almost, and learned a lot, and I understood that, and I think the world also understand now that sustainability is not a choice anymore. Not because really, but looking at a pragmatic point of view, sustainability is actually what will push humanity forward. We are too many people consuming too much. We need to find ways of continuing to do whatever we like to do and improving people's quality of life, but at the same time, in a way which sustainability actually matters, how we do that without damaging beyond repair the world for future generations. And EVs are an essential part of that. The not only EVs, but the mobility in general. When you talk about EVs, you can talk about fuel cells, biofuels, all this mix that will take us from a fossil internal combustion age to the electrification age for mobility. And Formula E is at the core of this in two main topics. One of the topics is research and development, technology, and the other is people perception of electric vehicles, which has changed massively in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I mean, when you started, you must have come across a lot of skepticism about whether this was feasible and whether people would be interested.
You have no idea, especially from a motorsport. Motorsport people are very nostalgic for any reason. So yes, when I said that we're gonna do an electric racing series, first people laughed about the project. They didn't even take it seriously enough, thought it was a joke. Then the thing started to grow and they start like criticizing there is no noise, or the car is too slow, or you have to change cars. And then they start to take it seriously. A few years later, they all wanted to join the series. So this is Richard Feynman, I'm a big fan of him, said once that you measure intelligence by your ability to adapt or to understand changes without getting offended. And this represents a lot Formula E. So when you look at, even if I love combustion cars, I grew up admiring and I love the sound of a combustion car. For general world mobility, there is no other way. We have to go to electric vehicles in general. So motorsport people didn't think this way, and now they are still reluctant, most of them, but a large portion now understands that electric can be fun, can be fast, can be exciting. And the new generation that is coming up, only looking at electric cars, only watching electric cars, they will never be fans of combustion anymore.
Well, Julia, how was it for you overcoming that skepticism from the motorsport world, particularly early days? You have people saying, why are you a sustainability manager? What do you do? What have you got to do with motor racing?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what Lucas described. A lot of skepticism and also a lot of, probably kind of like, I don't know if it's nostalgia or kind of like reluctancy to change in our environment. At the same time, I think that we were also very much the center of attention. And as we've seen, there's been so many kind of like victories and small steps that we tick the box little by little, delivering the first event when no one thought we would be able to deliver, finishing the first season and going on and on with more partners and team joining us until the place where we are now, where we are a world championship. And we have the biggest lineup of car manufacturers, in all the championships existing. Also, the fact that we see so many new series, fully electric, that are kind of like basically following the example of Formula E is probably the best testimony that we have to showcase that, yes, we've been probably kind of like, we've been going through the fire ourselves, but we certainly opened up, the way and the opportunity to showcase that electric championship, car racing championship is something that is highly attractive and that can really change the way we use transport around the world. Because as you were saying, this is still very much something that the general public needs to switch to.
You mentioned some of the other races and championships that have been springing up since Formula E paved the way. And Lucas, you're involved in some of these.
Yeah, that's correct, Conor. Mobility is not only EVs, and it's not only passenger cars. There is or this transition. There are basically two transitions in mobility that we see now. With the electrification of mobility can be much more fluid, in a way. So it means that you can have micromobility, which is basically e-bikes and e-scooters. You can have like you can have mopeds, you can have motorcycles, electric, and then you go to small cars, big cars, vans, and big vans and trucks and buses. So with electric, there is a very wide range of different possibilities now. And in essence, and let's say in a very resumed way, the smaller the vehicle, the easier it is to electrify. So you're never gonna see, for example, e-scooter or e-bike with a combustion engine, because it makes really no sense to have them. But the larger it gets, the more energy dense it gets, the more complicated it gets. So when you're talking about trucks that need to drive 20 hours a day, or planes, or helicopters, or long distance drones, a lot of people talking about eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles for urban mobility, but they cannot fly more than 25 minutes, half an hour. When energy density becomes a problem at the ships, we mentioned that 1/4 is mobility, but of that quarter, 10% is planes and ships, especially the big ships that transport goods around the world. You cannot just say at the stage, say, look, ships needs to go electric. It's impossible. And if they have to go to a completely new technology, hydrogen or even nuclear ships, the cost of goods to transport them will be so high that actually the world will lose a lot of value by doing this shift. So there is, of course, what we have to tackle. We are the low hanging fruits of carbon emissions, which are cost effective. Micromobility being one of them. Is better to ride an electric bike than actually to drive an electric car. The carbon footprint to ride to micromobility is the smallest we can get, and that's where actually it's my next step. We are creating the same way as we created with Formula E. We created a world championship for electric scooters to promote the technology development of electric scooters. Are very fast scooters, by the way. They're not commercial. They're scooters that reach up to 120 kilometers per hour. And the idea is to work on the safety and the technology the same way as Formula E has done. For electric vehicles, we're going to do that for micromobility with the electric scooter championship. Then the other vertent of development is autonomous driving, or at least autonomous or human-assisted autonomous driving. Level 3, 4, and 5 on autonomous drive. And we created in 2015 also RoboRace, which is to look at exactly this point, to bring into motorsport, or to bring into racing, or into closed environments and high speeds, the development of autonomous vehicles. We broke a couple of world records. RoboRace is still going on. If somebody wants to see, it's roborace.com, and the scooter championship is ESC, Electric Scooter Championship.live. It's coming up. So we are using the same format that's worked very well for Formula E for different types of promotions of areas of electric mobility and technology with autonomous driving.
And the interesting thing about what you're both doing is it's a twin track approach, isn't it? You're testing the new technology, which is changing at an incredibly fast rate, but it's also about raising awareness. Do you ever feel, and this is a question for both of you, I'll start with Julia, that we're all in a race against time, because the number of people who want to use transport, which has traditionally been combustion engine transport, scooters, I believe, is one of the fastest growing that Lucas was talking about, that you want to get the awareness raised that this doesn't have to be combustion engine technology, that we can massively scale up the amount of people using electric transport. So again, the race against time, Julia.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think it's now becoming very clear to all of us, as in kind of like the general public. It was clear to the professionals, the people working with the United Nations, a bit closer to what IPCC is producing on a yearly basis, their reports, and then what the Conference of the Parties is trying to do and to raise awareness about. We have 9 years We have 9 years to more or less cut by 50% of emissions. And this is the face of the challenge. This is massive. So we absolutely need to radically change the way we use to live. And obviously, from an individual level, there are 3 key leverages where mobility is one, and individual mobility, the way we use our cars, or the way we use kind of like to move around the city through public transport or kind of like a micro mobility solutions, is probably the most impactful leverage that we have on an individual level. Multiplied by 7 billion people, that makes a huge difference in that kind of like race against time. Again, 9 years. So it's very much at the heart of what we are trying very much to convey as a message. But we are trying to do it, first of all, offering a very concrete solutions, because electric vehicles that you see on our tracks, because we are backed by a number of, car manufacturers that are using the technology that they do develop through their involvement within Formula E, that transfer into their cars the next day, hopefully, and then the consumers, they are able to buy that and to make sure that they are kind of like benefiting from the latest technology, and then the rest of the event is also very much a showcase to give a taste of what the future can be in terms of sustainable lifestyle. No single-use plastic on our events, vegetarian option in everything that we offer to the public, whereas it's whether it's in hospitality or in the fan zone and so on. So it's very much showing that sustainable future is not about compromising. It's about kind of like doing things kind of like in an enhanced way with sustainability at the center, but not kind of like giving up anything on kind of like the everyday kind of like pleasure that you have kind of like in your lifestyles. We just need to change the way we do things, but it's not kind of like meaning something that is less. It's just different.
And on that subject, Lucas, you're Brazilian, and Brazil is or has been flagged as one of the countries where it's been difficult to raise awareness, to get that message through about the importance of sustainability. People are much more focused on immediate problems in the country: jobs, housing, poverty, unemployment. As a Brazilian, do you find that attitudes are changing, or are you concerned that it's still a struggle to raise awareness there?
Yeah, I have a little bit more a pragmatic approach compared to Julia. I think it will be impossible to abandon fossil fuels in such a short period of time. What we have to do is to look at the low-hanging fruits of carbon. Where can we invest to cut the most carbon effectiveness per dollar spent? And when you talk about this, Brazil it's a perfect user case. I even wrote an article saying that different technologies needs to be used in different places to achieve a cost-effective transition. You cannot just force everybody in Africa to buy electric cars. They cannot even buy a cheap combustion car or a second-hand one. How can you buy a full electric car, which at the moment has a higher capex than a combustion car? You can't. How can you force people to stop burning plastic and wood and garbage in general in India, in Delhi, when that's their only source of energy? Otherwise, they cannot cook or they cannot heat themselves. So it is, like I said, when you put economic development and the value into the chain, is extremely complex problems. In Brazil, for example, one of the main sustainability problems, everybody talks about the Amazon, but one of the main sustainability problems is that 50 million people don't have access to sewage. So they basically throw everything into the rivers untreated, and that has a huge impact into everything, the rivers, all the ecosystem in general. So, for example, it's a sustainability problem, but has nothing to do with carbon emissions, but how to give value to those people, how to generate the value, so we can actually give them the minimum infrastructure, so they can be more sustainable in the future. And one of the things that for me it's a very hypocrite from the developed countries is the easiest way to save the Amazon is to have a coordinated global carbon credit system on the regulated market. because carbon is a world commodity. You cannot segment Europe separate from US, separate from China, because when you emit the carbon, and that's why nobody wants to cut it, because as soon as you emit it, it goes globally. So why would I cut carbon and make my life, my citizens worse off if they don't do it? So at the moment, it's forbidden on the regulated market for a company like, for example, I'm in the airport, a company like Lufthansa to buy carbon credits from Brazil. But if you're able to do that, this will be the easiest and cheapest way of saving the Amazon, for example, because for Lufthansa, it will be much cheaper to buy credits from regulated areas in the Amazon and keep the forest up than to buy from, let's say, a German electric car manufacturer that actually plug their cars into the system that is based on fossil fuels for the thermoelectrics, because Germany has banned nuclear production of energy, is not fully sustainable in renewables yet. So actually the carbon footprint of Germany has gone up. So this hypocrisy in the world is what I don't like. And then you see people like Macron, like some people from the US, and criticizing Brazil. Brazil electric matrix production is 82% renewable already, and 70% from hydro power plants. And our solar incidence is twice as much as Canada, for example, average. So actually solar panels in Brazil are twice more efficient than Canada. So actually solar panels in Brazil are actually the lowest cost efficient unit of energy production that you can have. And you can use, then the skeptics will say, oh, well, what about the intermittence of solar panels? The intermittence of solar panels, you have the hydropower plants, you use them as a potential gravitational battery. So you pump the water up, you use it as a complementary for the system. So Brazil actually is very well positioned. Shame that we have a government that does not care about this. It's a disaster. The government, regardless if it's left or right, it's almost the same thing in Brazil. It's always corruption. It's always a mess that we've seen in developed countries and democracies which are not educated enough. But this system, but Brazil is very well positioned, and I'm very proud to be Brazilian. And Brazil has a bad image around the world, but actually we have 64% of our forested protected by law, more than any other country. We have, like I said, energy production. So actually the case of electric mobility in Brazil, if we make it cheap enough, will be a very, very important use case. And so, yeah, I see in this way. I hope, but of course, the governments they govern not based on the rationale, but in other priorities that actually is bad for this project of getting carbon neutral in the future.